Hello, this video is just one in my series of videos on the PXW FX9. In this video, I'll be covering the initial setup of the camera and how to use many of its buttons, dials and switches. Now, after switching the camera on, you may see a message saying, "Please execute APR." This is not an error or a malfunction. The APR, Automatic Pixel Restoration function, minimizes the appearance of bright or dark sensor pixels and minimizes sensor noise. If you see this message, you should cover or cap the lens so that all light is excluded and press the multifunction dial, the hand grip thumbstick or the set button to execute the APR function. If you don't perform APR, you'll be reminded to perform APR the next time the camera is turned on. You should perform APR regularly to maintain the best possible image quality, or if you notice tiny bright dots, that's bright pixels, within the camera's output. The multifunction dial at the front of the camera is very useful for navigating through the camera's menus. In addition, it can be used in conjunction with the push buttons for ISO gain, white balance, shutter and iris, etc. to quickly change these settings. You can also set the multifunction dial to control some of these functions directly without having to first press a button. If you go to the menu, Project, Multifunction Dial and Default Function, you can add a default function for the dial when the camera menu is not activated or when a function button hasn't previously been pressed. My personal preference is to set this to iris. The FX9 has 10 assignable buttons, plus the ability to assign an alternative function to the focus hold button that is found on certain Sony lenses. By default, there's nothing assigned to buttons 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, so there's plenty of scope to add new functions to these buttons. Functions are assigned to the buttons via the menu, under Project and Assignable Button. A suggestion is to assign the base ISO or sensitivity and video signal monitor options to two of these buttons, as these will likely be commonly used functions. In addition, if you shoot using S-Log3, you may want to assign Gamma Display Assist to another of the assignable buttons. By pressing the status button on the camera, you can view a series of pages that show the current status and setup of the camera. These pages are very useful for quickly checking things like recording setup, audio levels, scan mode, network and monitoring status, etc. It's recommended that you familiarize yourself with the status pages, as they're a very useful way to quickly determine how the camera is configured. Direct menu allows you to quickly access many of the camera settings without the need to enter the main camera system. The direct menu system can be accessed by pressing the direct menu button on the hand grip or by pressing the multifunction dial. Once activated, you'll see the direct menu items highlighted in orange in the viewfinder. You can then scroll through the direct menu items using the multifunction dial or by using the thumbstick on the hand grip. Direct menu items can then be selected and adjusted directly. For full details on the items that can be adjusted, please refer to the user manual. Now let's look at changing the white balance and tint. And it's worth noting that the FX9 now has the ability to vary the white balance and tint in all modes. You're no longer tied to just 3 white balance presets in the Cine EI mode. Setting the white balance correctly ensures that white objects in the scene appear white and that the overall color response of the camera is true to life. The white balance can be set to a fixed value that is selected when the white balance switch is set to preset. To change the preset value, set the switch to preset, then go to the menu and Shooting, White Preset and select the desired color temperature. Typical settings would be 5600 for daylight and perhaps 3200 for warm tungsten lighting. It's also possible to manually enter a white balance color temperature setting into the white balance switch A and B positions. To do this, place the switch into either the A or B position and go to the menu and Shooting, White, Color Temperature A or B and set the desired color temperature. Pressing the white balance button on the camera or selecting the color temperature indication in the viewfinder using direct menu allows you to quickly dial in the color temperature manually using either the multifunction dial, the thumbstick on the hand grip, or the up and down menu buttons. When changing the white balance color temperature this way, the new setting replaces any value previously set via the menu. If you wish to white balance off a white target, such as a white card, then the white balance switch A and B positions represent two memories in the camera that can be used to remember the white value for that white target. To set the white balance correctly, aim the camera at a white target, such as a piece of white paper, that is under the same lighting as the rest of the scene. Expose correctly and choose either the A or B switch position, then press the WB set button on the front of the camera. This will then store the white balance in the memory selected by the switch. The camera can also determine the correct white balance automatically by continuously analysing the scene being shot and adjusting the white balance while you shoot. This function is called ATW, Auto Tracking White Balance. Generally this works well in most situations, but you may occasionally see a very gradual shift in colours while shooting. To enable ATW, the white balance switch must be set to either the A or B position, then press and hold the white balance button for at least 2 seconds, or use direct menu to select the white balance options in the viewfinder. Then select ATW. This will enable the ATW function for the A or B white balance switch position. The white balance button will illuminate when the ATW mode is activated. Note that ATW does not function in the Cine EI mode. As well as adjusting the white balance, you can also add a tint to compensate for different lighting conditions or to adjust the overall hue of the image. Like white balance, you can have separate tint settings for both the A and B white balance switch positions. To add a tint, go to the menu and Shooting, White, Tint A or B. Adding a small positive value, for example +10 or +15, can be very useful for dealing with lighting that is too green. I do recommend though that you return any tint offset back to 0 when you no longer need to add a tint, as the tint setting may have a different effect under different lighting. Now let's look at setting the shutter speed or shutter angle. To change the shutter speed, press the shutter button on the side of the camera body and use the scroll wheel to choose your desired shutter speed or angle. If the shutter is set to off, or if you wish to set the shutter to auto or ECS, press and hold the shutter button for approximately 2 seconds. This will bring up a small submenu in the viewfinder where you can select the required mode. The camera can display the shutter time period as either shutter speed in fractions of a second or in degrees. In either case, the operation of the shutter is identical. There's no difference in the quality of the images captured. Shutter speed is the easiest to understand and is similar to how the shutter period would be expressed in a stills camera. With shutter speed, the shutter timing remains fixed at the speed set, even if you change the recording frame rate. The shutter angle setting mimics the way the shutter period of a movie film camera would be expressed. The most commonly used shutter angle is 180 degrees, which is half of the 360 degrees of a full circle. So a 180 degree shutter on a film camera would allow light to fall on the film for half of the shutter's rotation period. In a video camera, this means that the sensor will capture light for half of the recording frame rate. For example, if shooting at 24 frames per second, a 180 degree shutter will be open for half of 1/24th, which is 1/48th of a second. With shutter angle, if you change the recording frame rate, the shutter speed will also change, as it will always be the same fraction of the recording frame rate. To change the shutter period indication between speed and degrees, go to the menu and Shooting, Shutter and Mode. The ECS shutter is useful for shooting computer displays or devices where it's necessary to finely tune the shutter speed to match a particular frequency. For example, when shooting a computer monitor, you may see a dark band rolling down the computer screen. By adjusting the shutter speed while pointing the camera at the computer screen and using the ECS function, it's normally possible to eliminate or minimize these dark bands. Do note, however, though, that in an office environment where there may be multiple computer screens, you may only be able to synchronize the shutter with one monitor at a time. With auto shutter, the shutter speed will be set automatically by the camera's auto exposure system to provide the optimum exposure level. It's recommended that this should only be used when other forms of exposure control are unavailable. Now let's look at ISO and gain. To select the use of gain or ISO, go to the menu and Shooting, ISO, Gain, EI mode. There are several ways to change the gain or ISO of the PXW FX9. If you're using the Cine EI mode, please see the video on Cine EI for details of how this mode is used, as in Cine EI the way ISO and gain is used is different to conventional shooting. You can use the ISO gain push button to quickly set the gain or ISO simply by pressing the button and then using the multifunction dial to quickly set the desired gain or ISO level. You can use direct menu to select the gain ISO indication in the viewfinder screen and then set a new gain ISO value or set the gain to automatic. You can also assign 3 different gain levels to the low, medium and high gain switch via the menu and Shooting, ISO gain EI, ISO gain low, medium or high, etc. It should be noted that if you then use the gain ISO button and multifunction dial to set a new gain or ISO level, this new level will be assigned to the currently set low, medium, high gain switch position, overriding the value that you previously set via the menu. To enable or disable automatic gain control, press and hold the gain button for at least 2 seconds, or use direct menu to activate the gain submenu. From here you can set the gain to auto. The ISO and gain button will illuminate when auto gain or AGC mode is activated. Do note that if you are using auto gain, you can set an upper gain limit for the auto gain via the menu and Shooting, auto exposure, AGC limit. This can be useful for preventing excessive amounts of noise and grain from being added automatically. In custom mode with dB selected, the camera can be set between -3 dB and +18 dB, and the smallest step is 1 dB. There's no equivalent to -3 dB in ISO mode. In ISO mode, the smallest step is 1/3 of a stop, about 2 dB. The exposure and brightness of your recordings are controlled through a combination of shutter speed, gain or ISO, iris and ND filter. The camera includes a number of tools for measuring exposure. Zebras are commonly used to measure the brightness of either skin tones or highlights. Zebra 1 is designed to be used for skin tones. This is found under Menu, Monitoring, Zebra. For the original, that's the S-Cinetone gamma and standard gammas, the default level of 70% works well in most cases, a small amount of zebras appearing across a typical face. For the hypergammas, the zebra level should be reduced to 60% for optimum results. The FX9 also has a waveform, vector scope and histogram function. These are selected via the menu and monitoring, display on/off, video signal monitor. The waveform display measures the brightness of the recorded image and displays the brightness levels on a vertical scale that goes from 0 or black at the lower dotted line at the bottom to 109% at the top. There are additional dotted reference lines at 25, 50, 75 and 100%. The histogram displays the exposure brightness on a horizontal scale where black is at the left and 109% is on the right. The vertical height of the indicated level represents the amount of the image that's exposed at that brightness. The iris of a lens with an electronically controlled iris can be controlled automatically or manually. By pressing the iris button on the side of the camera for at least 2 seconds, or using direct menu to select the iris indication in the viewfinder, you can toggle the camera between manual iris and auto iris. When iris control is set to auto, the camera will automatically adjust the iris for the optimum exposure. When manual iris control is selected, The Iris Push Auto button can be used to momentarily set the iris automatically. When using Auto Iris or any other auto exposure function, it's possible to include an offset to the auto exposure to brighten or darken the image. There are presets for backlit scenes or scenes where the main subject of the scene is under a spotlight. These offsets can be chosen via Direct Menu or via the Menu and Shooting Auto Exposure mode. You can also enter your own offset to the auto exposure system using Direct Menu or via the Menu and Shooting, Auto Exposure and Level. The values indicated are fractions of stops. A plus value will make the image brighter and a minus value will make it darker. For a shallow depth of field film-like look, it's often desirable to use a large iris, between say f1.4 and f4. With a large iris setting, you'll get the greatest difference between the in-focus and out-of-focus areas of your footage. If you find that your footage becomes overexposed when using a large iris, you should consider introducing the ND filter to reduce the exposure level. In very bright scenes, you may observe a softening of your footage if you use a very small iris. This is due to diffraction effects, and as a result, you should avoid using very small iris values, say f16 or f22. The PXW FX9 has an advanced electronically controlled variable ND filter system. When the filter system is set to the clear position, there is no additional filtration in the optical path. When you set the ND filter to on, the electronically controlled variable neutral density filter system is introduced ahead of the sensor and allows you to reduce the amount of light that reaches the sensor. When the ND filter mode switch is set to preset, the ND filter provides 3 preset levels of ND filtration. The default values are 1/4, which is 2 stops, 1/16, which is 4 stops, and 1/64, which is 6 stops. However, if you wish, you can change these preset ND levels in the menu under Shooting and ND Filter. Switching the ND filter switch to variable allows you to use the ND variable wheel to vary the amount of ND filtration smoothly and seamlessly from 1/4 ND, that's 2 stops, to 1/128th ND, which is 7 stops. The variable ND function allows you to use the iris that you desire for the best depth of field or lens performance, and then finally control the exposure via the variable ND filter. The variable ND filter can also be made to operate automatically by first enabling the ND filter system by pressing the ND plus button and then pressing and holding the Auto ND button for at least 2 seconds. The button will illuminate when the auto mode is activated, and once activated, Auto ND will try to hold the exposure constant even if you change the iris setting. Using Auto ND, you can use your preferred iris setting to maintain a constant, pleasing depth of field even when the light level may be changing, for example while shooting when clouds are passing in front of the sun.